Alyssa Tramble McDonald, and today I'm going to be reviewing the SDAIE Strategy Famous Person Mystery. Now, despite the title of this strategy, it actually can be used for more than just helping students identify famous people, whether that be in history or in literature. It can also be used to help students review important concepts that have been gone over in class. So rather than students working to identify famous people, they could work to identify famous concepts or theorems, depending on your specific area of study. Now, this activity does rely on a certain degree of prior knowledge, so it can be useful at the beginning of a unit of study to help students activate prior knowledge, but you'll probably get its most use toward the end of a unit of study to review material that has been gone over in class. Now, it's up to you as the instructor to decide what it is you want your students to be reviewing. And the beauty of this activity is that that can be as broad or as narrow as you need. I'm going to be going into the area of social sciences, and as such, my examples here will predominantly focus on examples from history. But as I'm giving these examples, please feel free to be coming up with ideas of your own of how this would fit into your own subject matter in your own classroom. So under the area of history, I could choose, do I want students at the end of their world history class with me to be able to identify 35 major world leaders, or do I just want them to be able to identify a few key contributors to the American Revolution after a smaller unit of study? And it's up to my discretion of what I want them to be reviewing, depending on where we're at in this semester and in the material that's been covered. For this example, we'll be using famous leaders from history. So what I want to do is then come up with a list of famous people from history, and I want to come up with the same number of individuals from history as I have students in my class. So if I have 35 students in my class, I want to come up with 35 major leaders from world history. It's important here to make sure you've actually talked about these leaders from history before expecting students to be able to identify them. So as you're compiling your list, make sure you can think of specific examples when this has been covered in your class. Once you've come up with this list, you're going to go ahead and write this list out on name tags. All you need for this activity are name tags and a marker. And if you don't have those available, you could even use scraps of paper and Scotch tape. It's just important that you be able to affix the name tags. So what you're going to do is write out the names of the famous characters or leaders in world history on these name tags, and make sure that you have one for each student. Now, as an adaptation for this, if you're covering a smaller number of concepts or individuals, you can make this a small group activity, and rather than having the entire class of 35 work collaboratively on this, you can break students up into groups of 5 or 10 and only have them review 5 or 10 key concepts. It's really up to you and what you're wanting to cover. So once you've made the list of name tags for your students, here's where the fun part comes in. Rather than giving the name tags out to each student and having them put it on and know, okay, this is who I am, this is my new persona, you're actually going to distribute the name tag so that students don't see what's written on the name tag. So rather than handing it to each student, you're actually going to go ahead and stick it on their back so they can't see who their new mystery persona is. And that's where the title of the strategy comes in, Famous Person Mystery. Now, the whole goal of this activity is for students to guess who their new identity is through a series of yes or no questions. So students will be allowed to interact with other students throughout the classroom to try to determine who they are based on a series of yes or no questions. Now, obviously, this requires some degree of prior knowledge because students are going to have floating in their mind, who could I be? Am I a good person? Am I a bad person? Am I from a really long time ago? Am I from more modern history? And they're going to have to come up with a series of questions to make sure that they can narrow it down to who they are. Now, it is worth saying, if you're covering such a broad topic as famous world leaders from history, you may want to provide a word bank with your students, depending on time constraints. So you could list the 35 individuals up on the board for students to reference throughout. That way they're not guessing very obscure individuals that maybe you didn't even cover in class, but they've got floating around in their mind as an option. So this can be a helpful way to guide the discussion. Now, it's imperative that you make sure students are only asking yes or no questions. So, for example, they couldn't ask, am I male or female? Because the answer to that isn't yes or no, it's male or female. They could say, am I a male? Yes. Okay, moving on. They can't say, am I a hero or a villain? They can say, does history look on me favorably? No. Okay, so I'm thinking I'm a villain. And this will encourage students to be really thinking through all the individuals that they know and how they go about describing them themselves as they're crafting these questions for their classmates. At the same time, classmates who are answering these questions are getting a review opportunity themselves because they've looked at the student's back and they know who that student is. And they're having to go, oh, well, I know they're Genghis Khan. But, okay, I can answer, he was a male. Okay, but then when the student asks, was I in control for over 10 years? The student is having to rack their own brain before they can answer that question, so it becomes a review activity for that student too. At the same time, that student has their own identity that they're trying to solve. So it winds up being a little bit of controlled chaos, but it can be a great activity because it gets students up and around, moving around the classroom, and getting to interact with one another in a more casual way than perhaps in writing an essay or a more formal presentation. As such, this can be a really good activity for English language learners. One of the pros of this is that responses are just yes or no. They are not having to construct a 5-paragraph essay extolling all of the virtues of George Washington, but rather they're just having to know, okay, did he do this? Yes. Did he do that? No. Therefore, the verbal responses can be somewhat more minimal if a student's struggling with their speaking ability in your class. They will have to ask their own questions about their own identity on their back, but again, this doesn't have to be over-the-top detailed. They can be fairly straightforward, simple sentences, and therefore will give all of your students an ability to excel and to practice their speaking skills in a non-intimidating way. The end goal of this activity is for all students to identify who they are or what concept they are. As you're moving throughout the classroom, checking for understanding, you can help students out by giving a little bit more guidance, such as, well, maybe ask them about this, and help lead students to the proper answer. But the goal is that they should have enough background knowledge to be able to discern that for themselves. Now, once every student has identified themselves and all of the mysteries are solved, the activity is at an end. You can go ahead and follow this up with an additional review activity, perhaps a worksheet where students are having to write out a brief description of each character, or you can simply let that be and have it just be a more fun, relaxed reviewing activity for your students that's hopefully bringing up prior knowledge for them and helping them make connections between what they've learned throughout the course of your class. I hope this has been helpful for you. It is overall a very fun activity and actually feels a little bit more like a party game than some kind of chore. So hopefully your students enjoy it and you're able to use this tool as a review opportunity for students within your own classroom. Thank you.